Maccabees, the governor, left Jerusalem, seized many of his deserters, slaughtered them, threw them in a great pit. He established aliens over the country. Alchemists strove to maintain his priesthood. He took possession of the land of Judah and did great harm in Israel. Judah saw the damage. He took vengeance. Alchemists went to the king. King sent Nicanor, distinguished officers who hated Israel bitterly. He went with a strong force and a deceitful, peaceable message. He came to Judas. They greeted each other peacefully, but they were ready to kidnap Judas. Judas realized what they were planning to do, and he would not meet them again. Nicanor knew his plans were discovered and went out to meet Judas in battle, but they fled to the city of David. Nicanor went up to Mount Zion. The priest came out of the sanctuary, greeted him peaceably, showed him the whole burnt offering being offered for the king. He jeered and laughed at them, demanded Judas and his armies be delivered into his hands, or he will burn the whole house up. He went away in anger, the priest wild, and said, "Take vengeance on this man, let him fall by the sword." Nicanor met with the Syrian army. Judas prayed. When the king's men uttered blasphemy, your angel went and struck down 185,000. Crush this army before us today in that same way. The armies met in battle. Nicanor's army was beaten, and he himself was the first to fall in the battle. His army then threw down their arms and fled. Eventually, they all fell by the sword. They cut off Nicanor's head and his right hand, which he stretched out so arrogantly, and they displayed them in Jerusalem. They observed that day as a great day of gladness, decreed that it should be annually observed on the 13th day of Adam. The land was quiet for some time. Then Judas heard the reputation of the Romans, that they were powerful and favored those who joined them and established friendly relations with those who approached them. The Romans told people about their wars and their exploits among the Gauls and how they subdued them and made them pay tribute, and also all about what they did in Spain, taking possession of the gold and silver mines, and how they had become masters of the whole regions, though they were very far away from them. They also preached about the kings that came against them from the ends of the earth until they crushed them and inflicted great losses upon them, and how the rest paid tribute year after year. They crushed Philip and Perseus, the king of Chittim, and Antiochus, the great king of Asia, marched against them and was beaten. A section of Media, Lydia had been taken from him and given to King Eumerus. Men of Greece had planned to come and destroy. They sent one general against them, and the Romans took wives and children captives. They plundered and conquered the land, tore down the strongholds, and enslaved them to this day. The Romans destroyed and enslaved all other kingdoms and islands that ever opposed them. But they maintained friendly relations with their friends and those who relied upon them. The Romans conquered kings near and far. People were afraid of them. They set up kings and disposed of kings. Yet they never put on a crown or wore purple. They built themselves a Senate house. Every day, 320 men deliberated constantly, planning for the people. They entrusted the government to one man every year. Judas chose expense and sent him to Rome to establish friendly relations with them so that they might relieve them of their yoke, the Greek Orthodoxy yoke, as they saw the Greeks were reducing Israel to slavery. So he went to Rome into the separate houses, and he said to Judas, who was called Maccabees, and his brother and the Jewish people, "They sent us to you to make an alliance, a firm peace, that we may be enrolled as allies and friends." The Romans were pleased with this offer. This is a copy of the letter which they wrote in answer on brass tablets. Good fortune to the Romans and to the Jewish nation, by sea and land forever. Aye, the sword be far from us, but if war is made on Rome first or any of her allies, the Jewish nation will act as their allies and supply no wheat, no arms, no money, and no ships to those who make war on them, as Rome decides. In like manner, if war is made on the Jewish nation first, Romans will act as their allies and supply no wheat, no arms, no money, no ships will be supplied as Rome decides. On these terms, Rome made a treaty with the Jews. But if hereafter one party or another decides to add or subtract to it, that whatever they add or subtract will be valid. And as for the Greeks that are bothering you, we have written to King Demetrius and asked him why he has made the yoke so heavy upon our friends the Jews. But if they appeal against you and continue to oppress you, we will side with them and make war on you, by land and by sea. When Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his troops had fallen in battle, he sent Bacchides, the governor, and Alchemist into Judah a second time. Judas's army had slipped away and was few. Judas wanted to fight the large number, but his people wanted to wait for reinforcements. Judas said he will never flee from them, but he would prefer to die bravely. They advanced, they made war. Many died on both sides, including Judas Maccabeus. His brothers buried him in Modin. After Judas died, all the lawless men raised their heads over Israel. There was great famine. Bacchides chose ungodly men and appointed them as masters of the country. They sought out the friends of Judas and punished them. There was distress in Israel that had not been seen since the time the prophet ceased to appear to them. So Judas's friends went to Jonathan and said, "Since Judas dies, there's been no one like him to go in and out and against our enemies, Bacchides the governor and the hostile citizens. So we're going to choose you, Jonathan, to be our ruler and carry out our war." Jonathan accepted and took the place of Judas. Bacchides learned of this and tried to kill him. Jonathan fled to the wild country of Tekoa and camped. Jonathan sent his brother to entreat the Nabateans as friends and to get them to watch their great deal of baggage while they went to war. They seized the messenger, and news came to Jonathan that these people, these sons of Jambri, were having a great wedding and the daughter of one of the great nobles of Canaan. So they went up and hid under the shelter of the mountain. They saw the bridegroom and his friends had come with drums and musicians and weapons. Then Jonathan fell upon them and killed them, took spoils, so the wedding turned into grief and lamentation. Bacchides heard of it and came with a strong force, and Jonathan stretched out his hand to strike back. He gave ground before him. Bacchides' med fell. Returned to Jerusalem, built fortified towers, strongholds in Jerusalem and other places. He put garrisons in to harass Israel, and took the sons of the principal men as hostages, and put them in custody at the citadel. In the year 153, in the second month, Alchemist gave orders to tear down the sanctuary, and he, Alchemist, was then stricken. He was paralyzed. His mouth was stopped. He died in agony. The land was quiet for 2 years. Then all those who disregarded the law were mad that Jonathan and his peeps were living undisturbed and secure. So they called the governor Bacchides to arrest them. He sent letters to all his allies in Judah to arrest Jonathan, but he couldn't. They seized 50 men who were ringleaders in this wickedness and killed them. Jonathan withdrew, and Bacchides fought against them a long time with siege engines. But Jonathan went with a small force and struck down Odamerera and fought Bacchides. Bacchides was angry with his unlawful advisors, and he resolved to go back home. Jonathan sent envoys to make peace with him to obtain release of prisoners. Bacchides agreed not to injure him as long as he lived. Prisoners were released, and the sword ceased in Israel. Jonathan lived in Mishmash, and Jonathan began to judge the people as he destroyed the ungodly from Israel.